So thanks for your time. What's your impression of what's happening in Dallas, in particular, in the country in general?
Yeah. Well, I think we're seeing an outpouring of pain that's been building up for some time, and that, of course, COVID-19 and the death of George Floyd has really highlighted. And this is something that I think has required us to take a look at it and have real change for some time. But these crises, I think, have raised it to a level where we really need to take action now.
What factors are coming together right now that have really made this so explosive?
Yeah. Well, COVID-19, I think, has held a mirror up to our society and shown us some of the deep inequities that have existed there that we don't always talk about. The public health impacts, the economic impacts have been felt more deeply by our communities of color, and particularly by African Americans. And of course, seeing the murder of Mr. Floyd, I think, has exacerbated feelings that have been existing for some time, a feeling that there's not a system that's working right now, a feeling that the folks who are supposed to serve and protect are not doing that in every community. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of pain coming out. And we have to listen to that pain. We have to understand what's going on. We have to try to address it with reforms that will actually do something and that will help all Americans, regardless of what they look like or where they come from, chase their version of the American dream.
So I understand the Congressional Black Caucus is sort of working on a package of police-related reforms, or is it even broader than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the instance right now that we're in is one that's calling out for reforms to our law enforcement, to our police departments, to make sure that they can do the work that we know they want to be doing as well. I want to restore confidence in our police and also restore a feeling of justice in our communities. I think that is our goal. But we also, of course, are going to have to tackle some of the deeper societal issues that are, of course, rearing their ugly heads right now. And that will be an ongoing project. But I think in the Congressional Black Caucus, we're going to be considering a package of laws to try and make sure that we combat any form of police brutality, that we outlaw certain forms of interacting with folks like chokeholds that we saw in George Floyd's murder that should not be used. And then we also study some of the underlying issues that are making it more difficult for our communities of color and our police to interact.
I've been hearing, we just got off with a guy in Austin named Peniel Joseph, who's a head of their civil rights sort of school. And he was saying, I don't think Congress can do much about this. This is really a local issue. Does Congress have a role? Can you affect some change in this broken government that we have right now?
No, we absolutely do have a role, and we can help also spread best practices. We can outlaw certain things from anyone who's accepting federal dollars. There are roles that we can play, and that I think it's important that we do play. But you're right, a lot of this change and reform does have to happen at the local level. What I think we're seeing across the country is that there are very different reactions in different places, both to what happened and to the protests that have followed it. We want to make sure that we have a country in which you can express yourself, in which you can peacefully express with your First Amendment protections, the things that you want to see change in your society. That's what our experiment, this American experiment, is all about, is the right to express yourself and to do so in a way that's consistent with who we are as a country. So there's a lot for Congress to do, and there are actual changes that we can enforce. And there are some things that we can also help spread in terms of ways and best practices that have worked in other places.
I've heard some people talk about, well, it's time for a new Civil Rights Act, which is a pretty high bar to cross. We haven't done that very many times. Do you see that as a possibility?
Well, I think we have to look at some of the structural issues that are in place. And while the Civil Rights Act certainly has protections against being discriminated against, there are some affirmative things that I think we need to do to try and provide opportunity. And that's what I think we really need to be looking at, is what are the ladders of opportunity that we can make sure are in place for our African American communities, for our communities of color, so that the American dream is widely shared and can be accessed by everyone. And to me, that begins with access to healthcare, that's access to a good education. It's to be free from discrimination, free from fear of your own police or your own government. These are some of the fundamental things that all Americans expect, but that aren't necessarily present in all of our communities of color.
So what are the specific proposals that we might see coming from the Congressional Black Caucus?
Yeah. Well, we will have some legislation, as I said, to ban chokeholds. I think that's something that the Dallas Police Department now has done for nearly 20 years, and something we should see spread across the entire country. We will also try to end some of the militarization of our police. When we see, armored personnel carriers, people who look like troops showing up on the streets of American cities, that's not what people think about when they think about their police. Police should be focused on community policing, on keeping people safe. We don't want them to be seen as sometimes a military force enforcing the rule of the government or anything like that. And the militarization of our police is a very real and I think troubling trend that we've been seeing across the country. We'll also have a commission that we're forming to study Black men and boys and what's going on in our communities and what can be done, and to recommend legislation, changes that can be made to try and even out some of the inequities that are going on in our society. And there may be more that needs to be done.
There's a proposal from the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. You've probably seen that, and they are saying, let me open this up. They create federal use of force standards, a national database of officers with revoked licenses, create enhanced accountability for civil rights abuses. You're talking about prohibiting excessive force or racial profiling. There's also this concept of ending legal immunity for officers, essentially, who do something wrong and then can't be held accountable for that by being sued. Should officers have that much immunity under the law?
Yeah. Well, what we want to make sure is that if an officer does something that violates the law, that they can both be removed from position and that there can be appropriate consequences. We don't want this to be a situation where we are seeing our officers being used as pawns or anything like that. Well, we want to make sure that there's some level of accountability. And so what I'd like to see us do is pay our police more standards, but also make it so that you can get rid of folks who are involved in the police who are doing the wrong things, and that they don't get hired by other police departments. That's a key point that we've seen across the country. So sometimes if you can't make it somewhere, you can go somewhere else. You can still engage in that conduct. And so this is the reforms that from the police that I've spoken with, and I spoke with Chief Hall earlier today, and I've been speaking with some of my colleagues who have served in law enforcement. These are some of the changes that they've recommended, and there may be others. And I think we have to consider all of those things, because trust has to be restored and confidence in our police has to be restored for us to move forward as a society.
I think, see if I can have, sorry, I'm going through my notes as we speak here. So I think speaking to the Hill, Senator Cornyn said, sorry about that. Never been able to do an interview with my computer open like this. The idea that Senator Cornyn says the idea that somehow we're going to paint all of law enforcement with a brush of racism is outrageous in and of itself, and it's obviously designed to divide the country further. How do you respond to that level of let's not paint the police as the problem?
Well, listen, the police have a tough job. And when I spoke with Chief Hall this morning, I thanked her for her service and for the service of our Dallas Police Department that has done, I think, in many cases, an excellent job, and that is seen around the country as a good department. And we're asking the police to do more than they've ever done, to be involved in mental health, to be counselors in many ways, because we're asking them to cover many of our societal ills that we're not covering through other means. And so I recognize how tough the job of our police is. But there are clearly mistakes being made. There are far too many Black men and women who are being killed by folks who they trust to serve and protect them. And that breakdown in trust breaks down the entire social compact. It makes it harder for us to move forward as a society. It makes it harder for us to report crimes when they do happen in these communities. And we have to restore that trust and deliver justice when things go wrong. That's not blaming the police. That's just having, I think, an appropriate level of accountability. I will continue to support our police. I want to make sure that we also make their job easier by restoring the relationship between these communities and our police.
So my last question is, we have all these people in the streets, people who've not been in the streets before, and a coalition of Black and white and brown people. I mean, this is like an amazing group we've not seen, and they want action. what can you reasonably expect to give them from Congress?
Yeah. Well, we will take action. We will pass legislation in the House that will try to address some of the things that we're seeing and some of the things that need to be done. The question will be, what is the Senate going to do and what is the president going to do? Will they step up and will they recognize that there are some changes that need to be made that will move our entire country forward? Or will they pretend that this status quo is acceptable? I think what we're seeing across the country and certainly across North Texas is that there are a lot of people who believe that we must make some changes. And I think they believe it because they are hopeful. They believe in our country. They believe that we can be better than this. It's not a negative impulse, it's a positive one. And we have to build on that by delivering real change. And if we don't, I really fear that there will be a loss of confidence in our government, a loss of confidence in us to deliver on the things that people want to see done.
Thank you for your time. I said I'd take 10 minutes. I think we're right on the money. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Thank you, Congressman. I'll see you again.
Okay.